You're in the right place. We're going to begin officially now for the ELD Standards Framework, Secondary Language Arts. My name is Julie Duffield, and I'm here with the Region 15 team, comprehensive team. And I just want to quickly do an overview of some of the technical pieces today. We'll ask you to mute your microphone, use the chat at any time to share your ideas, your questions. We'll be having some polls, and just feel free to put up your hand if you have any questions, and we'll be pausing at different times to take your input. Again, a little bit about Region 15 Comprehensive Center. The Region 15 Comprehensive Center is one of 19 federally funded regional comprehensive centers. And the comprehensive centers provide capacity building, technical assistance, content expertise, and resources to state education agencies. And the Region 15 Comprehensive Center has collaborated with the Nevada Department of Education as thought partners on this project. And I am joined by my Region 15 colleagues. If you want to give a wave, Ruth Sebastian, Delphine Kwan, and I'll introduce today Laura Finley Scapola, who is a member of the evaluation team. So it's my great pleasure, without further ado, to hand it over to the presenters today. And first of all, I'd like to introduce Dr. Kuwodi Axel and Dr. Sophia Masavage from the Nevada Department of Education, and also introduce Dr. Diana Walker, who is from Northwestern Regional Professional Development Program. So over to you.
So thank you so much. This is Sophia Masavage, and I really thank you for joining today. This has definitely been a busy day because I know many of our district LEA leaders are in the title meeting. And so thank you for coming to this particular webinar. I'm so excited about it. Dr. Walker has done an exceptional job, and she certainly consented to do the secondary ELA. So as we move through the slides, the one thing I think we have in all of our webinars is really that message that all of us know, that the education of English learners is a shared responsibility of all educators, and that English learners must have access to rigorous, standard-based instruction. And so this is really about the simultaneous development of language within content. And this particular webinar is around secondary ELA. So as we move next to the next slide, please. This is really a series of webinars designed for educators to learn how to use the ELD Standards Framework really within the context of a lesson. And it's really around the best practices for English learners and really other learners who have not yet become proficient in the academic language. So what I would like to do in the next slide is really try to assess who's in the room. And so would you please, we have a poll. And if you would look at any of these role descriptors and just mark. So let's pull up the poll. So we have classroom teachers, instructional coach, English learner specialist or teacher on special assignment, school district office staff, school administrators such as principals, regional professional development staff, NDE staff, or other. All right, so thank you for kind of filling in this particular poll. And I think it's really helpful for us to know who's attending. And as we know that these are recorded, they are part of our suite of webinars that's on our web page and really accessible, particularly for professional development. All right. So looks like the majority of the people that we have are instructional coaches. Wonderful. Facilitators of learning. Thank you. And then we have certainly EL specialists, district staff. Thank you for coming. NDE staff, classroom teachers. So glad you're able to come. I'm going to now turn this over. If we could close the poll. I'm going to now turn this really over to our presenter today in the next slide. And Dr. Dinah Walker from the Northwest Professional Development Program region will really begin the presentation today. So thank you, Dr. Walker.
Thank you, Sophia. Welcome to today. Before we get started, I want to take a moment just to thank you for being here. It's been an incredibly challenging year. We live in challenging times, and I think it says a lot about your dedication to teaching, to your students to be here today after school, after contract. So with that, let's get started. Our agenda for today is we will look at the ELD guiding principles. We'll look at a quick definition of quality learning of English, the learning of English language arts. We'll look at an example lesson and apply that example lesson to the ELD Standards Framework. And there will be a little bit of time at the end for your questions and for the answers to those questions. On the next slide, we're looking at a graphic of the ELD Standards Framework guiding principles. And these are the principles that were used to help inform the framework. I am hoping that as you look at this, you see the very clear connections to NEPF. Standards-based instruction, extended discourse, metacognitive development, formative assessment practices, highly aligned to the NEPF standards. In addition, we see student assets and shared responsibilities and shared responsibility. And this is a reference to that whole idea that our students come to us with gifts. They come to us with skills. They come to us with strengths. And it's our job to pull upon those strengths and then to build on them. And the idea that all students are all of ours really guided the ELD framework development. On the next slide, we see the guiding principles 1, 2, and 3. The focus for today really will be guiding principle 2 and 3. Not that 1, 4, and 5 aren't important, it's just they're not the focus of today. So principle 2, we're really talking about access to grade level standard with intentional scaffolding, and guiding principle 3, using extended discourse through multiple modalities to really develop students' grade level skills. On the next slide, we see guiding principle 4 and 5. I'm going to pause, give you a chance to look at those. Again, very important, but not necessarily our focus for today. On the next slide, we're looking at quality learning of language arts, and there's 3 dimensions that we'll look more closely at. One is the conceptual focus, and that's the whole idea that we are engaging students in ELA content and practices that promote their cognitive understanding and their ability to use the power of language. We're designing instruction so that students can participate in that sustained discourse. And that 3rd dimension is that purposeful focus on language. We want students to be able to see how language works across contexts, and we want to increase their skill levels in the purposeful use of language. So when we think of quality learning of language arts, it really goes back to students growing knowledge and skills that apply to their life. On the next slide, we're looking at a process for outlining a lesson. All of us plan our lessons in our own way. It's very likely that in how each of us does this, we think through these 3 things at least. The first thing we think through is what is the knowledge and skills I want students to understand and be able to do. The second thing, especially in ELA, we're thinking, where does this fit across the year? What's come before, what's coming after? How does this chunk of instruction fit into that? What comes before and after? What's getting pulled through? What's being let go? The second thing we think through is how are we either building in or tapping into student prior knowledge and experience? And the third, how are we making sure that we're having students apply this across contexts? So learn it and then apply it across contexts. Okay, on the next slide, we have the review of what we just talked about. The next step in thinking really is thinking through scaffolding. And Intentional scaffolding not only to provide access to students, but also to provide scaffolding so that students are focused on the heart of the lesson. They don't get so caught up in other parts that they never get to the heart of the lesson piece. And then what language do students need to be able to access, process, and show what they know? And the next slide, we're looking at the context of the lesson. So in my teaching career, I was both an ELA teacher or an EL specialist supporting an ELA teacher. And so for me, I was like, okay, we can't just focus on one lesson. I need to think through the whole big picture to get there. So I'm sharing part of that picture with you. This is a unit on argumentative writing. The students will need to write a formal essay. It's open topics. They'll be able to choose. They'll have to follow argument essay structure, and they'll need to use sources that meet 9th grade classroom appropriate criteria. Then at the end of the unit, what they'll do is they'll take that same topic and they'll change the format and they'll change the language for a new audience. So for example, they might do a podcast or a TED talk to change the format. They might have a different audience: parents, siblings, a business owner, a government agency. Days 1 through 3 of this argumentative writing unit, though, will be a Socratic Seminar. And I'll be using that to review process skills and language for argument writing. In the next slide, we're going to look at who the students are. So 9th grade students, wide range of knowledge and skills for argumentative thinking and writing. Any 9th grade classroom I've been the teacher in or supported, there's always a wide range of knowledge and skills for argumentative thinking and writing. Some kids come in, they're still highlighting everything, right? Some kids come in, they're still confusing evidence and reason, and the difference between them. Some of them are still having a hard time matching evidence to their reasons well. And then some can crank out a paper that meets like the 11th grade standard, right? So that wide range of knowledge and skill. I also know in this group, I was thinking of that I have long-term English language learners at proficiency levels 3 and 4. Long-term English learner just means they've been in the country for more than 7 years. There's a very good chance their dominant language is English. On the next slide, these are the things I already have in place in my classroom, because this setup will not work unless these things are in place. I've got instructional routines in place. For example, my welcoming routine and my closing routine is established in my classroom. I already have several partnerships or small groups determined based on what their native language is, what their skill in their native language is, what their skill in English ELA content is, and their personality, right? Who can go into a group, has the social skills to help facilitate a group, who's on the shy side. So I already have partnerships and small group in mind. I've already explicitly taught the micro skills of paraphrasing, clarifying, supporting ideas, building up on ideas in small group discussions. And they have done Socratic Seminar 2 to 3 times. On the next slide, we're going to look at the purpose of Socratic Seminar. Oftentimes we use Socratic Seminar as a cumulative activity. We use this after they've deeply read a text, a deeply engaging text. And then we have them prepare by reading and annotating the text to the Socratic Seminar. So just curious, if you guys wouldn't mind filling out the poll, how many of you guys, or how familiar are you with Socratic Seminar? Have you not used it ever? Is it something that you use quite frequently? So what is your familiarity level with it? And if you are familiar with it, how have you used it? If you would please put that in the chat. Thank you guys for doing the poll. As you guys are putting your answers in the chat and filling out that poll, I'm going to share for this particular use of Socratic Seminar, I have secondary purpose. I really want to use Socratic Seminar to review the language and skills and the process for argument writing. And I'm also using it to provide scaffolds for argument essay writing. I'm going to do a quick look in the chat to see how you guys are.
Yeah, great news, Dr. Walker. Most people are very familiar with it, so that's great.
Nice, Monica. That is a great use of it, to use the themes in a novel, to discuss themes in a novel. Absolutely. If you are comfortable, if you would like to continue to share in the chat, that would be great. In the meantime, let's take a quick look at the Nevada Academic Content Standards on the next slide. For this. Okay, so quickly sharing the poll results, we have the majority of you guys are familiar with the Socratic Seminar. A couple of you are not familiar at all. If it is something that you would like more information on, Ruth is going to put a link in the chat to a resource page that has more information about the Socratic Seminar. There's a link to a video on there that is fantastic. Highly recommend it. Okay, moving back to the Nevada Academic Content Standards. You guys will notice the standards focus for this series of lessons, or for this lesson, is really focused on the speaking and listening standards. This lesson, this series of lessons, is really leveraging those speaking and listening standards to support, deepen, and extend student understanding of the reading and writing standards. Okay. First, I think it's easy. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I think it's easy for us to lose sight of the speaking and listening standards. And that's unfortunate, because we can really leverage them to learn more about our students and where they are. So on the next slide, we're going to start with the task. Students will participate in a Socratic seminar focused on cell phone use in schools. On the next slide, we're going to ask you guys that question, that connection to prior learning. For English learners, go back one more, thank you. What prior knowledge or lived experiences may they bring to this topic? If you guys wouldn't mind responding in the chat. Christine, I love your use of exclamation point in your response. Absolutely, right? They have them, they use them. Thank you guys for responding. Catherine, absolutely, you made me laugh, having them confiscated perhaps, right? So Stephanie, thank you for saying that. They're definitely a common experience between students. They are also, it's also a topic that students very likely have strong opinions on. Okay, so thank you guys for responding in the chat. On the next slide, so we had that big unit, that big argumentative writing unit where they're writing an essay, and then they're going to change the format and change the audience. But this is the first 3 days. So in that first 3 days, we're reviewing the process, we're reviewing the skills, we're having them get some exposure and practice to the academic language. Please know that this could take up to 4 days, that the design of this would change depending on the number of or the amount of resources I have and the level of tech that I have access to and that students have access to. At times I will point out some differences, but as we're going through this, if you're like, oh, that can be done online, I'm thinking, yes, absolutely it could. Or, oh, I would have to change it this way because of my context. Yes, absolutely. Please think that way and feel free to share as you're having those thoughts as we go through. So day 1, it's an overview. We're going to have a common text. The focus of the day will be on annotating. Day 2, the focus of the day is on claims and counterclaims and organizing information. Day 3 is the Socratic Seminar, and the focus is on academic language for argument. So if we look at that next slide, we break day 1 down a little bit more. We're going to do a quick summary of days 1 and 2, and then take a deeper dive into day 3. And day 3 will be the focus lesson for connecting it to the ELD framework. So day 1, the welcome activity, it's a building background activity. Are cell phones more helpful or harmful for learning in school? quickly overview, we're doing Socratic Seminar, and guess what? This is the topic, yay. And then there will be a mini lesson focused on annotating. The mini lesson will be about 8 minutes, maybe 10, and we'll go something like this. When we read for purpose. When we annotate what we're reading, we annotate for the purpose we're reading for. Quick partner talk, how do you do that? Again, right, because I'm trying to figure out what they can do and what they can't do. Okay, if you're not quite sure how to do that, here's one way it could look. Now, again, that partner talk, what's your plan today to annotate this familiar text for pros and cons of cell phone use at school? And then I'm going to send them off. And as I'm going to go around and I'm going to check. And during that work time, I'm looking to see if they can do that. If they can't do that, I'm going to have a T-chart backup. Then I'm going to help them. Oh, if you're not quite sure how to do it, try this T-chart. Pros on one side, cons on the other. Okay, so during that work time, they'll be annotating the required article and they'll have access to additional articles. And when we get to the next slide, I'll show you what that could look like. And then the closing discussion and exit ticket for the day. Again, a routine in the classroom. What's your best piece of evidence? What makes it strong? What annotating method worked for you? What will you make any changes to how you do it tomorrow? Again, this is for me getting information about that argumentative writing unit that's coming next. On the next slide is just a very abridged version of possible text. There's the anchor text. They'll be familiar with it. It's one of the Kelly Gallagher's articles of the week. Other articles can be, things you pull off the internet, podcasts, videos, infographics. There's a couple of purposes behind these different formats. The first one is it's multiple entry points for students. I'm trying to make as many students as independent as possible in their ability to take notes. The second thing is it provides examples for some of those different formats that they'll be doing at the end of the unit. Next, we look at day 2. So the connection for day 2, again, that welcoming activity. What reasons would you give a favorite adult for why cell phones should or shouldn't be allowed at school? Having them think through their reasons, right? We're going to overview the note taker, which we'll look at more closely on the next slide. The mini lesson is a 4 to 5 minute mini lesson on writing claims and counterclaims. These are 9th graders. They've been looking at claims and counterclaims since 6th grade. So this is what it is. Here's a couple of sentence frames or starters if you need it. Counterclaims, this is what it is. This is what it isn't. Here's a couple of support sentences to help you. Then work time, they're going to read and annotate. They're going to write claims and counterclaims, and they're going to transfer some support from annotations to the note taker. The closing discussion and exit ticket for day 2. What's your best claim and counterclaim? What makes it the best? So I'm looking, can they write them? And I'm also looking at what's the criteria they're using for determining what's the best. On the next slide, we're looking at the note taker. This is the universal support for this series of lessons. I'm going to give you just a second to look at it. This scaffold takes us right to the heart of the lesson discussion, and it lets students take notes in a way that they can come to this discussion ready to go. They don't have to think through what am I going to say or how am I going to say it or what that support piece is. They can just focus on what they need to say. I would like to give a quick shout out, hat tip to Christina Proctor. She is where I got this from. I adjusted it for this topic, but this is where it came from. So if you want it, teaching channel, and then adjust for it. Also, I want you to note on here, there's clear grading criteria. If you do these things, this is how you earn points for them. And if we go to the next slide. Now, day 3 is the lesson sequence that we're really going to take a little bit of time on and break down a little bit more. So activating prior knowledge on day 3, we're going to do a think, pair, share. And with that think, pair, share, we think about the prompt, may or may not have them right, depends on a lot of things, right? They're going to pair with their partner, exchange their ideas, and then share. And with this particular one, go ahead and keep going, Julie. With this particular one, I'm going to have them share what their partner shared. And the reason why is because I want them focused on listening and I want them focused on paraphrasing, because those things will help them with the Socratic Seminar. On the next slide, the questions that we're asking them in that Think, Pair, Share are, how do people talk differently in different situations? What's an example of 2 situations where you talk differently? And why do you talk differently in those situations? The setup of this is very intentional. I want to connect the formal language that they will be using in Socratic Seminar with the formal language that they will be using in their argumentative essay. I also want them to set them up for the end of the unit activity, right? Language changes for context. So the second time the second argument that they make that's for a different audience in a different format will be different. It also takes some of the value judgment out of language, and that is also intentional. Different context, different language, normal, it's the way it is. Okay, so on the next slide, again, we have another mini lecture. If kids have access to technology and I have access to technology, these mini lectures will be screencasts and will be homework. In this mini lecture, we're connecting the formal language of argument to the Socratic Seminar, and we're overviewing academic language options in that Socratic Seminar. The support for that we can see on the next slide. This is a dialogue guide. For 9th graders, the format would be a little different. This is friendly for you guys. If you notice on the left, it's what you can do. You will be sharing your claim. You'll be refuting potential counterclaims. You'll be building on the claims of others, respectfully disagreeing and referring to sources. These are supports to help you do those things. They are optional. If you would like support for how to do this function, here it is. If you have another way that's still formal to do it, you are welcome to use that. So this mini lecture is super short. Here's the language, here's the types of things you will be saying and doing. Here's some language support for you. Because on the next slide, during that independent work time, this is about 10 minutes. Students will be practicing for Socratic Seminar. They'll be practicing claims and counterclaims, practicing paraphrasing what they heard someone say, practicing building on ideas, agreeing and disagreeing. For this to work, I have to have thought through my groupings, right? So I'm going to make groups that can be independent, make them independent. So that usually means my medium and highs are together, and they can do this practice with the universal scaffold from the mini lesson. That's what we just saw. I'm going to put my students who need very explicit coaching and support together, because with this 10 minutes, I will spend most of my time with them directing their practice. Okay, what's your claim? What's a counterclaim? Okay, paraphrase what he just said. Can you build onto her idea? And I can coach in and provide that feedback so that when they go to Socratic Seminar, they are ready. I chose this topic because 3 of the teachers I'm working with through the ELAD courses did something very similar to this. One was 5th grade, one was 8th grade, and one was 9th grade. And interestingly enough, 2 of the teachers had this explicit work time as part of the process, and one of the teacher did not. And in their reflection, they talked to each other and about each other's. The 2 teachers who had this work time said it made all the difference. Like, this was the piece that made their English learners and their extremely shy students ready to participate. One did a debate, and 2 did Socratic Seminar. The one teacher who didn't have this time said, I wish I would have, it would have made the difference. Okay. So on the next slide, we're going to look at why. Language routines are processes that kids do multiple times. So the process is the same, but the content is different. And the reason why language routines are so powerful is they support sense making. They make sense of the language, they make sense of the skills and the concepts as they go through this. Optimizing output. Over time, they get better at it. The more you practice something, the better you get. Right? And it cultivates conversation. And in this conversation, students can fill in gaps, they can make mistakes, and that group can help them correct it in a safe, low risk way. And then it maximizes meta awareness. It really helps students organize their thinking and apply that thinking across contexts and to reflect on their language use. So if we look at the next slide, we're really looking at Socratic Seminar, and we're looking at Socratic Seminar as a language routine. Again, we have a resource for you guys if you would like it. The purpose of this slide isn't to overview Socratic Seminar, but to kind of share how it would get set up for this group of kids on this day. The goal with Socratic Seminar is to move students towards independence so that they are facilitating the conversation. They've only done it 2 or 3 times. I'm very aware that they will still need some prompting. They will also need to review the process before we begin. Pushing the kids towards as much independence as I can, because while they are talking, I'm collecting information, right? I've got my Excel spreadsheet, I'm making little tick marks where they're to give them a grade, to give them their score. And I'm also collecting information on how they're doing, like how are their claims and counterclaims? How good is their support? Are they able to identify reasons, right? So gathering all of the information I can around their understanding about argument. On the next slide, at the end of the day, I'm collecting information that feeds forward to the next part of the argument unit. So I'm going to have them create a boxes and bullets. I'm probably going to say, pull out a piece of paper, tear it in half, share with your friend, put a boxes and bullets organizer together. It needs to have a claim, a counterclaim, and 2 to 4 reasons that support your claim based on cell phones, the cell phone use in school. I am using this and I'm looking for things like, are they using the sentence frame still for this? Are they coming up with reasons, or are they just pulling in support pieces, right? Okay, so let's take a look back at this whole series of lessons on the next slide. We've got the activities along the left and the purpose on the right. I'm going to be quiet for a second and give you a chance to look at that. So that mini lecture, set purpose for formal argument language, provide examples. A guided work time support practice for language use, and they're still synthesizing and organizing their information. Socratic Seminar, that language use in a meaningful context, and they are building on ideas, evaluating and critiquing the reasoning of others. And then that exit ticket for me to really feed forward into the next part of the unit. Okay, so if you would please make some connections on the next slide, we're going to look at the guiding principle 2 and guiding principle 3. So guiding principle 2, that access to robust grade level content with scaffolding, and guiding principle 3, extended discourse through multiple modalities. So please choose one, either access to grade level content or extended discourse, because on the next slide, I am so looking forward to hearing from you in the chat around how you're thinking around how do these activities support meaningful discourse and access to grade level content. I'm going to pause here, give you a chance to respond in the chat. Thank you, Catherine. Absolutely. They have students, they have an opportunity to practice the academic language. Thank you. Okay. If you think of anything, please put it in the chat, or if you are typing, please continue to do so. Here. Good, Christine. Thank you so much for adding that. They use the think, pair, share to practice the language and to discuss the grade level content. Geraldine, that's a great noticing. Teachers have an opportunity to work with students who may need more help. And I would like to extend on that, Geraldine. That's a great point. If I am lucky enough to have an EL specialist in my classroom working with me at this time, co-teaching with me, that is a place where one of us could be providing that extra support. Oh, Monica, thank you. Yes, opportunities, multiple opportunities to respond. And Stephanie, nice addition. The graphic organizer and the peer support, give them access to grade level content. Oh, Perla, that's a wonderful addition. Thank you. The intentional scaffolding supports the routines so that they feel safe and comfortable. Nice. Thank you guys so much for your thinking there. Oh, okay. Oh, nice, Cole. Nice addition, the 4 domains. Okay. So now let's make a transition from this day 3 lesson sequence to how it relates to the ELD Standards Framework. So on the next slide, we have the Standards Framework, and we are so fortunate, right? Because it addresses English language arts, social studies, math, and science. It is very comprehensive. On the next slide, we are focused in on the 9-12 English language arts version of the ELD framework. So on the next slide, this is an overview of the structure of the framework. There's 3 parts. Section 1 is an overview. Section 2 provides general support ideas for English language arts. And then section 3 really focuses on the language arts practices. So when we move to the next slide, we'll really be looking at section 2, and those are the general ELA supports. And those are broken down into student moves and teacher moves. The student moves are focused on language use expectations, and the teacher moves are focused on supports for processing and producing language, and supports for collaborating in academic language. So now let's move into the actual document. So this is 2A, students move for receptive listening and reading. So when I'm thinking of receptive listening and reading, I really am thinking about access, giving students access to grade level content. If we start in the middle column, so developing, expanding on the access, this is levels 3 and 4. Even if they're not an English language learner, we have some of our students who are working at this level. And when I look through, I'm noticing words like distinguish, interpret, predict, and apply perspective. I'm also noticing that the examples at the end aren't quite a perfect match for what we're doing. So I'm just going to notice those language functions. If we move to the right, I see counterclaim, apply, predict, counterclaim, apply perspective. And if I move to the left, I see identifying main ideas. Let's look at the next slide and see what other things that we can pull out that are a match for our lessons. So this is productive. This is speaking and writing. When I think of this, I really think, how are students processing? How are they producing? How are they showing us what they know? And again, if we look at that middle column, I'm seeing things like compare and contrast, summarize, respond and elaborate. Okay, that's definitely happening. If I move to the right, there's discuss, explain, provide critical commentary. And then if I move to the left, we're talking about levels 1 and 2, I'm thinking infer, predict, and apply. Okay, again, those language functions very clearly happening. Maybe the specific example is not quite so tight. So let's look at the next one. So now we've moved to teacher moves. Okay, so what are the things that teachers can do to support processing and producing language? We're going to start in that middle column. We're levels 3 and 4. And oh my gosh, I'm looking at this and I'm getting kind of excited because I'm seeing almost all. I'm seeing build background knowledge. I'm seeing modeling orally. I'm seeing provide explicit instruction, provide a system for students to record and process key academic content. Okay, I don't know about you guys. At all times and during all times, it's really important to celebrate the small successes. It's especially important this year. So we are celebrating the fact that there's a lot of connection here in this middle column. Let's move to the right. Okay, building background using complex sentences, modeling orally. It's there. If we move all the way to the left, so our right column, bridging, reaching levels 5 and 6. These are highest levels of English proficiency. 6 is almost native-like. Right? If we move all the way left, we go to entering emerging levels 1 and 2. So these are often our newcomers and at the secondary level. 1 through 4 are there. Build background, provide explicit instruction, model orally, and provide explicit instruction and practice for students to construct the language. Okay, that's pretty exciting. Let's look at the next one and see what we see. Again, that middle column, levels 3 and 4. Holy cow, it's all there. I don't know if you'll notice, Socratic Seminar is actually one of the recommended strategies here. When I was designing the lesson, I didn't actually know that, but when we went back and made the connection with the framework, I was super excited to see that piece. So we've got them all in the middle column. Let's move right to that bridging and reaching. We've got them all there too. If we move to the left, there are a lot of supports there. So as we move to the next slide and we make those explicit connections between what are the teacher moves and what are the student moves to provide supports for our English language learners, this is what they are. I would love to hear your thinking in the chat at this point in time, like what connections can you see? On our left side, we have the activity. So it's the lesson sequence that we talked about. The language in the middle column comes directly from the framework, structured pair work to share experiences. So that structured pair work to share experiences. The small group work that students are doing in the Think, Pair, Share and the guided work time is supports for those kids. In the chat, someone had made, in the chat, one of our participants made the comment about support through the graphic organizer and support through peers. And that absolutely happens in the Think, Pair, Share and the guided work time. The student moves in the Think, Pair, Share, the listen, speak, and report partners ideas. During the mini lecture, that's where we provide the language models for complex language. What the students are doing is they're identifying and matching appropriate language to context. During the guided work time, the structured small group work, so intentionally putting those groups together. One of the teachers I'm currently working with, she's a 9th grade teacher, and she talks about how often she lets students choose their small groups. And for her, it was a realization that she could increase the power of small group work by being intentional about how she puts students in those groups. The student work is to offer ideas, compare ideas with others. In the Socratic Seminar, this is modeling, building background and in the key language. The student moves are to summarize and respond, provide critical commentary. Exit ticket, checks for understanding for content and language. And for the students, it's to process the learning. We move to the next slide. I would like to make a note here. This lesson sequence was really designed with a lot of students in mind. It wasn't designed with newcomers in mind. So thinking through what adaptations could be made for newcomers, we'd be thinking through language supports. Oftentimes for newcomers, access to grade level really is around providing access to native language resources. This is where I would definitely need strategic partnering with the EL specialist, right? Because oftentimes with newcomers, that adaptation and instruction is pre-teaching and post-teaching. And then incorporating community and technology support. What this means is oftentimes we can call on colleagues. The AP Spanish teacher may be willing to give students extra credit to translate an article for you or to read an article, right? You might be able to give extra credit to a different class or the same class for someone to read one of the articles so that they have access to it orally. And then technology support. All of us that have used the like Google Translate or the free, widely available translation resources, know that they're not perfect, and sometimes they're pretty clumsy. But in a newcomer situation, we can often leverage them as a starting place. They can give kids basic understanding of what's happening, or they can write in their native language and then put it through the translator, and then we could provide feedback on one or two things to help improve that writing, right? So when I think of newcomers, there's another level of thinking that would have to happen in this lesson. Now let's move into ELA Practice 5. This is section 3 of the framework. I'm going to ask you guys to respond in the chat. Okay, so our focus was ELA Practice 5. So how does the lesson sequence of activities provide English learners with opportunities to build upon the ideas of others and articulate his, her, their own ideas while working collaboratively? So I'm going to pause here, and I want to give you guys a couple minutes in the chat to think through that. As you guys are thinking through that, I want to make a quick connection to how these things align. This question is related to the guiding practice 3. It's related to the NAPF standard 3, meaning making through discourse. And it's highly connected to our Nevada academic content standards around speaking and listening. I don't know about you guys, but when all of the things align, I get kind of excited. So how does the sequence of activities provide, now specifically, not just all students, but English learners with opportunities to build on the ideas of others and articulate his, her, their own ideas while working collaboratively? Okay, thank you, Christine. Okay, she said there's multiple ways. Awesome. Let's see if we can come up with just like 1 or 2 specific examples. Thank you, Geraldine. So she talks about the think, pair, share, collaborative work time, and the Socratic Seminar. Okay, good. And when we're thinking about scaffolding up, right? Geraldine did a beautiful job of showing us that the progression of the scaffold. Think, pair, share, collaborative work time, Socratic Seminar. Thank you for that. Okay. Now, if we look at the next, oh, never mind. We're going to pause for a second and look back at the chat. Okay, thank you, Sandra. That was a nice observation. So the opportunity, like at each stop, they get a chance to feel successful before the next one. Catherine, you said something that I think is really important to share. Students can evaluate the validity of their arguments. Absolutely. That's another place when I think with high school students, is that not every argument is a valid one. And this really gives them a chance to kind of think through that. Perla, thank you for adding that comment about all of the language domains. thank you guys for your comments in the chat. They're well thought out and quite lovely, and definitely worth saving if you would like to do that. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at the next part of the ELD framework. And in this next piece, this is really specific supports for the practices. Ours was ELA Practice 5, the building up ideas of others and articulating your own thoughts. And we're going to start again from the middle. This is levels 3 and 4. And we look here and we're like, oh my gosh, okay. Explicitly model the academic language, provide graphic organizers, provide structures for students to practice, pair students with a partner of the same primary language. We're thinking about that and building our partnerships, providing dialogue structures. And we look over here at when we go up in levels of proficiency to the right and levels 5 and 6. Again, they're all here. Yay! Always celebrating where we can, right? And when I look all the way left in levels 1 and 2, and I'm looking down, and right in one of the places it says provide an exemplar. And I'm thinking, you know, that is actually a really good idea for a whole bunch of kids, not just our students at levels 1 and 2, right? But a quick video of what Socratic Seminar looks like, sounds like how do students sound when they do this? I think is a beautiful idea that could be added to and strengthen this lesson sequence. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the next part of the framework. And this part, we're really looking at success criteria and what we can look at for success criteria. And this happened in 2 places in this lesson. The first place was the collection during the Socratic Seminar, right? You know, the more independent students can be, the better information I can get. So that's the place where I'm getting the information for how they're doing is while they're talking in the Socratic Seminar. I will also get it after looking at their note taker. The exit ticket was really less about ELA Practice 5, building upon ideas, and more about getting information to feed forward for the next instruction. So when I think what is the success criteria, that was clear in how I was collecting data and giving them grades that was established on the graphic organizer. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, it really is it's questions and wrap up. So what are your questions? What are your comments? Do you have any concerns about this lesson sequence? Please feel free to share in the chat.
We can also invite people to unmute themselves or put their hands up if that works for you too. We see any hands up if you want to share a thought.
Okay. Doesn't look like we have any questions, but as we move forward, if you come up with any, we will pause and answer them. Oh, thank you, Catherine. That is really nice feedback. So Catherine made that connection to, you know, it's not just for ELs, right? Like this unit can be used for any 9th grade student. Stephanie pointed out how the activities built on the preceding activities. Thank you, guys. Again, we only have 5 minutes left. At any point in time, you are welcome to put any comments or questions in the chat. But I think we will move to the next slide.
So thank you, Diana.
And here's contact information. The leads on this and their contact information is here. And I actually think I'm supposed to turn it over to someone at this point.
Yes, Sophia?
Oh, yes. So yes, thank you so much, Diana. You've worked through this over the last 3 years with us in terms of the being a part of.
So Julia's saying thank you. So
And,
contact information
I
if you need
need
it. On the
exceptional
next
work.
slide is the link to the
Oh.
survey.
I've-
And Ruth has put into the chat the link to the entire webinar series. And if we can move to the last, the survey link-
Diane, can you hear
actually,
me?
if we can move to the
Diane,
last
can you
slide.
hear me? Diane, can you hear me? No, I don't think. Okay.
I want to take a second to thank you guys so much for being with us today. Please take a couple of minutes to fill out the survey. Your feedback is invaluable and really helps inform next steps. And once you've had the link to that is in the chat box. And we'll move to the last slide.
And we just do that. I would just like to hand over, Diane.
Thank you guys for being here today.
I just hand over Sophia. Sophia, do you want to say some parting words?
Wow, what an
And as soon as you filled out the survey, if you would like to be done, please go enjoy the.
Sophia, over to you.
All right. So I think Diana may be muted in some way on her technology. However, I just want to really thank her for all the work she's been engaged with us, along with 25 other educators across the state in the development of the ELD Standards Framework. Exceptional. I want to thank you for that. To the WestEd team. We have another webinar coming up on April 29th, same time, 3:30 to 4:30. And it's the ELD Standards Framework Science. And we will cover both elementary and secondary within that webinar. So, I think we're at the end.
So thank you all. Thank you. We'll give a round. We'll go to the reactions. We'll give Diana a big applause and thank you all participants for being here. We'll officially ending the presentation today and invite you back, as Sophia said, for the next group. So thank you, be well, and keep up all the great work you're doing. The dates for the next webinar are posted into the chat. April 29th is webinar 7. Thank you.